maximize. Hold on one second. Just maximize the screen so it'll be biggest. And yeah, so I guess today, are we gonna what do you want to try and cover, just so I know what to sort of label?
Yeah, going back real quick, we talked about the Wright College with Bertrand Goldberg with the repair, where I went out there and saw things above the scope of work that we were hired to do. And I looked up, and with this project at Wright College that hold on. Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know what sounds like you're whistling or a whistle or something.
I might have my mic too close. Is that better?
Yeah. Again, kind of picking up background stuff. But
yeah, it's a real sensitive mic. Maybe you know what I think I did? I think I beefed up my microphone. Let me turn my mic down some. It was the other day when you couldn't hear me. I was like, wait a minute, let me turn my mic up. So maybe that. Okay. Is that any better?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Again, it's kind of picking up everything, and there's a little not feedback, but again,
okay.
just background
I'll put the mic even lower down, and maybe that's better.
Okay.
Okay.
So you started talking about this structure, and this is the pyramid. Again, before I kind of got into the understanding of symbology and everything else, you kind of realize what they're dealing with here, because missing capstone and all that great stuff. But this was the setup. Again, his signature is concrete, and this is, I kind of call it a moon base looking style. He had Marina Towers, which I'm sure most people are familiar with, and he was the architect for that. And on this, the repair, because of the congestion of the steel and that ridge beam, this beam, all the load bearing down to this corner, and this is what was falling apart and grossly under-designed, that they ended up putting massive steel plates on the exterior so it could take everything. It's basically stabbing the guy in the heart, because he's such a concrete guy, and the only fix we could come up with was steel. When I say we, it's CTL. The design team were just a brilliant group of guys that were the number crunching gurus, and I was not part of that crowd.
Right, and I think sort of where we left off yesterday was, you were sort of sent there for a totally different purpose, but you happened to notice this major issue, and it, potentially could have saved lives and probably saved that architect a major embarrassment down the road. So,
this would have collapsed. I can't prove that, but I would almost guarantee that would have collapsed at one point during construction, because it was showing so much distress by just the early construction of the framing. It was horribly distressed and falling apart. So once it got the additional members on there, I'm sure something would have happened. Cataclysmic, things tend to be slow motion, but again, the day before a cataclysmic event is everything seemed fine.
Right. So, yes. Calm before the storm.
Right.
Yep.
So that was that. And the oil, if people are curious what offshore, of course this is what offshore oil platforms, what it looks like.
Wow.
So, when you fly out there, you think there's only a smattering of platforms, but it's almost like driving through Iowa cornfields.
Right.
There's you're never out of sight of a platform, and at night it being lit up. So again, when say one of these was the one I was working on, that there are adjacent ones in the area, and one of the kind of the sit around the campfire stories was in, I think, 85 was Hurricane Alicia, and I was on we were doing an installation, and they called for the evacuation because almost as it was approaching overhead where we were, it was getting categorized as a hurricane, exceeded I believe it's 74 miles an hour. And so they called for the evacuation of the Gulf, and I was on the last of the 3 helicopters to go inland at that time. And when we took off, it was about 65 mile an hour wind, and little Sikorsky 17 picked us up. It was, I don't want to say tense. I was a knucklehead 20-something, so it was kind of neat. But, when we got up on the helideck, you had to crouch down and kind of crawl to the helicopter, and he could only hover over the platform, so he had to kind of jump up 3 feet. So we got the last of the people into the helicopter, and I was behind the pilot, and he turned around and he said, "I shouldn't have taken you guys up because the winds are over 65. We're not supposed to fly in 65. It's, screaming because you can't hear anything because it's so loud. Just because the helicopter's so loud.
Sure.
And the guy sitting next to me is a big guy, offshore guy, and he grabbed my arm. He goes, what'd he say? And, being a stupid 20-year-old, he isn't sure if he has enough gas to make it back or not. The guy grabbed my arm and gave me that bug-eyed, "Are you serious?"
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I was kidding.
Yeah, helicopter. I'll tell you, man. That's a very dangerous, very dangerous thing where minor thing can go major wrong. And this is really sort of not changing the subject, but sort of a different aspect on this subject. And if maybe you could keep that image up because it does show sort of the level of drilling that we're doing, and that's just in the little Gulf of Mexico area.
Oh yeah.
Let me ask you something from an engineer standpoint, and let's just consider this in the globe Earth model. The globe Earth would obviously be an enclosed system where there's a finite amount of oil, they call it fossil fuels, enclosed within this sphere. And this sphere would necessarily be in perfect balance with gravity. So essentially you've got gravity pushing in and this outward pressure of the sphere wanting to essentially come apart. And you have this balance between the sphere essentially imploding and exploding because of so-called gravity. So that's the theory. Now here's something I had an issue with growing up as a globe earther. If you're continually pumping out oil, and I don't just mean a little bit, I mean constantly pumping out essentially matter out of the ground of this finite sphere, and increasing, first of all, you're decreasing the stability of the structure, but you're also increasing the load on the structure by increasing barometric pressure. I always thought that it was sort of a very dangerous thing to continually drill for oil because the planet could possibly implode. Now that we know that the Earth is flat and we see that these oil wells are actually replenishing themselves, to me it sort of proves that there's more to this than obviously fossils, which was all just bullshit anyway. But what do you, from an engineer standpoint, what do you suppose of that theory that I've sort of been kicking around for many years about drilling oil out of the ground and basically putting it into the atmosphere where it's pushing down even more on a structure that has less stability as you pump more out of it? To piece that together, it's just so much for me to kind of grasp right now and to put it into the pieces that you have. I'd have to kind of lay it out and fully understand where you're really putting things together and then look at it from a volume standpoint. Sure. Think of like a sinkhole. I mean, a sinkhole's caused when the water table gets too low and the water can't support whatever limestone sort of structure the ground happens to be. And so if you sort of think of it that way, you know, the oil underneath the ground would be causing back pressure or resistance against gravity. And I always just sort of struggled with, well, god dang, if we pump too much out and keep it, you know, putting it into automobiles and exhaust, you know, the barometric pressure is going to increase while the load-bearing capability of the Earth is decreased. Eventually you're going to reach a tipping point where it's just going to implode on itself. But whatever, it's besides the point. I just just thought it was sort of funny to see how I'm very surprised to see, what is that, maybe 500 wells, something like that.
I should know that number. It's probably over 1,000.
Wow.
But it's a number I should know, or at least give a ballpark, and I'm not sure if I'd give out a reasonable ballpark.
And now, are those owned by different corporations and then sort of leased out, or are they all basically owned by the same?
No, it's, there's dozens and dozens of oil companies, and then they have joint ventures, and one of the things I can lay out is the offshore grid. Oh, I should have already that in there. Oop. I have a very sensitive keypad. Come on. Come on, Brian.
No worries. I'll just edge around it.
Right. It's like I said, I get nervous for no reason whatsoever.
Nah, it's just fine.
No, it's not. It's abnormal. So, anyway, kind of give you an idea that the entire Gulf, and this is the same for the North Sea, that it's divided up into these blocks. And I don't know who has the final say, but what happens is a certain block will go up for auction, and these offshore lease sales, and I remember in 85 that there were, again, just several of these will go up, and companies will go in and do their geology report, and the geologist would say, I think there's oil there. So when these biddings came up, you'd get a company bidding, $10 million for a block, and others would be $200,000 for the same block. And the biggest one I remember was one of these blocks that Mobil got the bid for $93 million, and the next highest bid was, I think, $800,000. So the backstory on that was some geologist going to his boss saying, hey, I think there's a lot of oil there, make sure we get that block, and so bid high. And so they got the thing for $93 million, but the next high bid was $800,000. So figure the geologist in that one was going, hey, it's just expensive water, so forget it.
Right. And now who does that money go to? The federal government?
That's the thing. A huge chunk. I should have an answer for that, and I don't. It's through government agencies, but...
Because I thought nobody could own the ocean. I thought that was sort of, going way back to, what is that thing? It goes way back to the old,
the maritime laws?
Yeah, it's sort of like that, but it's I'll think of it when I'm not thinking of it.
Yep.
Habeas corpus, not habeas corpus. It's anyway. I'll think of it. It's irrelevant. I'll think of it when I'm not thinking of it, and I'll just blurt it out.
Okay.
All right.
But I was trying to go back to the of that map I had with all the platforms on there. What happened to it?
It looks like it's your first tab, maybe.
Oh, map. Yeah.
Is that the one? Yeah, there you go.
Yep. So as you see here, that there's nothing, and that's a state item because of Texas, and that was 6 miles. So there's no production or drilling platforms within 6 miles. Now, obviously over in Louisiana, it's different, and again, something governs the fact that nothing within this barrier can be drilled. And going in closer, kind of see what I mean, where
wow,
this is just a number of platforms. And again, if this is one block, you'll have platform A, B, C, D, all the way through the alphabet. So again, here's another, you can see little pockets. Maybe this gives you an indication on your question where how the deposits of oil are in the strata, where lots, not so much, and what happens here is that's the shelf. And when I was in the industry back in the mid-'80s, Cerveza, who owned Cerveza? Exxon? Anyway, Cerveza was one of the deepest fixed structure, meaning it was, remember seeing those framed items that you said you couldn't tell the difference between the old one and the new one?
Right, yep.
Okay. Well, that platform, it's called the jacket for the structure, that the deepest steel jacket at the time was around 1,500 feet, and the platform was called Cerveza. Then there's another one about 1,300 feet or so, and that was Cerveza Ligera, meaning beer light. And so they always had those funny names for the special projects. But you can see after the fact that they've gotten more and more platforms in here, and I doubt if there are very many fixed platforms of that depth, but they had the floating rigs and other configurations that allowed them to mobilize over those areas. I wish I had where the BP platform was that had their issues.
Right.
But
Yeah,
I'm going to guess it was around this area. It could have been the deeper. I don't know.
Now, if you were on a bunch of these, I would imagine, do you remember seeing any, or do you remember any just off chance? And I know we don't tend to document these sort of things as globe earthers because we don't think about it, but do you recall ever seeing any really, really distant rigs that should have been well below the curve? Like, do you...
you're out there and it's a sheet of glass. I don't care if there's a 10-foot chop out there.
Yep.
It's, from, I don't know what we flew at, 10,000 feet. I don't know, I'm guessing. But you're just looking at basically a sheet of plexiglass down below that has an infinite horizon. But again, it gets into just your visual limitations of visibility, and I don't know, everyone seems to kind of fall off at 10 miles, but I did find one photo that I wanted to show, because we talked about Michigan City.
Okay.
And, oh, come on. Do you see the screen now with the boat with Chicago in the background?
I do indeed.
And so that was from the Michigan City to Chicago race. And in this year, the night before the race, there were about 40-mile-an-hour winds for hours. And to leave the harbor, there's about a 12 to 15-foot breakers. And only about half the fleet broke out of it. But once we broke out, this was the view we had to Chicago. And at this point, it was about 25, 30 miles. The entire race is 31 miles. And when I took this picture, things had settled down a little bit, and only probably less than an hour into our race portion, and that's what we saw.
And so, do you know about how many miles away that is? It looks pretty damn far.
It's between 25 and the length of the race.
Okay, so about maybe 20 miles or greater than 25.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
And again, it's a drag race, and that's what you see for the entire time. So,
yep.
again, whatever our boat speed was, say 6, 7, 8 knots, that's a drag race in slow motion, and you see that constantly.
Now
So
you
when you add
figure
that,
you're probably the camera's probably about 10 feet above the water. I'm assuming because the hole's probably about 4 foot above the water plus an average person say 6 foot. So we're saying maybe 10 feet above the water level. Is that about right?
yeah, I was trying to think of something, but you said 10 foot above the water level?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so basically what we would want to do is, obviously we'd want to know the exact distance, but to figure.
Oh my gosh! I just thought of
Sure,
something.
go ahead.
Look at this! Look at the sun rays.
Yeah.
In second thought, I think this was a little bit later on in the day because of the sun. It did take us. We didn't get out of the harbor till afternoon.
Yeah.
But just seeing where the sun is, this was later in the day, and okay, I'm going to redact that a little bit. That was probably around 15 miles at this point.
Okay.
But
And
my gosh, look at this.
yeah, look at the crepuscular rays. If you see the ones way off to the right, yeah, that's obviously
here you go, people.
a source of light that is a apparent source of light that is close. And if you look at something that I've got a pretty cool image of, but if you look at still shots of lightning, sometimes you can find lightning that's just all the way from horizon to horizon, and it doesn't behave like that. Only sunlight. And so to me, that's very good proof that, yeah, you've got a close apparent source of light. Yep.
There you go.
And even
that's 93.5 million miles.
Yeah, really.
Oh my gosh, it's funny. Anyway,
yeah.
So
even at 15 miles, if you say you're 10 foot above the horizon, 10 foot above the water level, then you want to subtract. Let's see.
Yeah, that's a straightforward math issue.
Maybe 5. We'll say you want to subtract 5 miles from the distance. So even at 10 miles, we'll say 10 times 10 is 100 times 0.666. So we're talking about 66.6 feet of curvature, or are we talking about 666 feet? Now I got to.
Well, remember I told you my issues with when I took a number and ran with it that I either forgot to divide by 12 or multiply by 1,000.
Let's just say it's 10 miles times 10 times 0.666666, and we're talking about, okay, so 66 feet of curvature. That means that there should be a drop of 66 feet from where your line of sight meets the horizon to the base of those buildings, and that's just at, say, 15 miles, and we're being generous by subtracting 5, assuming that you're at 10 feet above is probably closer to 4.5. But anyway, so 66 feet of downward curvature, I don't see it at all. So, and that's being very conservative. It probably would be more than that. But anyway.
Well, that's getting to the point where it's just ludicrous. After a point where, we all see what we see, but then we're being told something that's just absolutely ridiculous. So, whatever.
Yeah, it's obviously perfectly flat. Over 10 miles, over 20 miles, over 50 miles. It doesn't matter. You never seem to find any curvature. So, yeah.
Again, you grow up being told something, and then you hear the excuses of why, and again, everyone's heard you're just a little tiny speck on top of a basketball, so of course it's going to be flat. But again, then the math, what does the math say? Well, you just explained what the math says. So between what, they back out, defending themselves with the math, and then that's what comes back to bite them because the math doesn't work out. What your math is saying is that this should be below the surface and not see certain things, and again, that's the whole thing with the NASA eclipse challenge is the NASA or the eclipse data proves what the shape of the Earth is.
Yeah.
So you're hiding behind something that's going to reveal that you're hiding.
Right, and maybe that's a good segue into the eclipse data because there's when we see shots like this of the buildings over the horizon from say 15 or 20 miles away, and we see the sun apparently being very close. This is all very good evidence, but one thing that I think that is really important and sort of the crux of this documentary is going to be looking at the eclipse data and how the essentially, and I'll let you obviously do the technical explanation of it, but
caught me mid-gulp.
Oh.
No, this isn't technical. I have a technical background, but the issue is not technical. It's straightforward principle, and you don't need a lot of formal education to come up with the same assessment. Now, I know a lot of people that would say because I have an alphabet after my name on letterhead that's you should listen, and what I'm saying makes me an authority. I am not an authoritarian figure whatsoever. And, the background is somewhat irrelevant. The way I kind of broke down the databases into a recognizable way that you can understand what you're seeing is one thing, but by no means does the brain capacity make any difference on what we're trying to present. This is observational fact,
and what you're saying, I totally agree with, and it's totally true. But unfortunately, the fact is that our society has conditioned people to believe that if something isn't peer-reviewed, for example, then it isn't true. Or if people with PhDs or, letters behind their names don't, come on board with the topic, then it isn't true. If something's not on the news, on Fox News at 8 o'clock, then it must not be true for somehow. And so, unfortunately, that is the case with a lot of people. And so, having somebody that, such as yourself with a background in engineering and a background in really sifting through data and really applying the data to real life situations and real life models. Not everybody is, I'm sure, I guess everybody could do that if they were so trained or so inclined. But, it seems like you're the perfect person to do this, and it seems like you've done it, so we might as well hear it from the expert. So.
Anyway, no, what's kind of led me to do this is the physical situation. But again, I don't want to get into the some of these things right yet. But kind of breaking some things down, that I try and organize my brain, and I've always had an issue that my brain doesn't get along with other parts of my body, and with my mouth gets in the way too. So there's always this ongoing battle of mouth not listening to what the brain's trying to tell it and everything else. So when I sat down trying to organize thoughts, that this is what ended up coming out. And kind of these things I do want to highlight, but maybe you don't have to really focus in on this, but gloss something else over the narrative. But, my whole thing is that this is 100% perception issue and has nothing to do with technical background. So, just some quick thoughts on this is it's obvious fact. Fact meaning this is what you see. It's, people use gravity and throw that in, and it's an innocuous term that means nothing. And again, just founding a principle based on an ambiguous item that no one can agree upon versus, hey, I look out there and things seem flat and everything indicates that the globe is not only impossible, it's just absurd. That, why are we even at this starting point? Or, this should be an end point by, in all terms. That this is something that I would have come up with and try and, as a joke, as being the jokey guy, going, hey guys, the world's not flat. I think it's round. And pedal it that way, but to have the opposite come by, it's just absolutely ludicrous. So
yeah,
anyway.
Well, and I think the issue is, well, as a matter of fact, I know for sure that
the issue is that
we're all sort of forced into this paradigm when we're very young and when we're unequipped to argue against it properly, and we all just sort of grow up believing that all of these things are true. But in fact, when introduced with the idea that there might actually be an alternate model, or there might actually be a debate here, I mean, to me, that's the key, because we all just went under the assumption that there wasn't any debate, that this was all just a foregone conclusion, that we live on a spinning globe, and so, that's the issue, and it's very well indoctrinated into most people, especially in the Western world. But yeah, all intents and purposes, what our senses tell us and what we can see tell us is very good evidence that it's flat and stationary, but unfortunately that isn't good enough. Unfortunately, we have to use the authority. We have to use their own numbers against them, and in this case, the authority being NASA, and the numbers being the eclipse data. So.
Right. So again, going back to just some general thoughts, that seems like people are throwing at, attacks against the so-called leaders, and from a different observation is a person put out a video a few years ago, and it was taken from a wine party, it seemed, and Matt did a great job of, indicating what is real and what's not real, and how we're misled on things. But correct me if I'm wrong, that he didn't really push this item very much after that little or few of those videos that came out.
Well, the original person that sort of woke me up to this was actually Matt through his videos, and so there's always sort of a special place in my heart for him for that. But to an extent, I agree that at some point he sort of I'm not sure if his message just sort of got diluted or unclear, but I found it hard to follow with him on a lot of the things that he said. But I still
was it ever a message beyond that dinner party or that wine party where he did the presentation? Again, I'm not attacking the person. It seems like out of 20 videos that were out there from his production, that was one of them. Then all of a sudden that topic has resurfaced, and Mark did an incredible job at his presentation, and then it's gone kind of a reboot.
Yeah.
And now it's become, minor mainstream of an issue or topic that's being discussed. But as far as, if I were to come out and say, hey, I think I've discovered something, that I've noticed that guys can't get pregnant. And so I am going to start disseminating to people that I think only women can get pregnant and guys can't. And to me, that's almost identical to what's going on here is someone's made the revelation of, hey, we've been deceived and lied to, and that's great, but back it up a step on we've just been deceived. That's the issue, not what shape it is.
Yeah.
So again, we're looking at direction or directors, and it's like, what direction? The direction is fact.
Well, and I think that's an important step in the process, though, because once you realize that there is this deception going on, and once you realize that a lot of the proofs of the globe are very flimsy and can sort of work in either model, that's like, really step one. And from what I gather, and I'm really leaving myself to set up everything with a bunch of caveats because I don't know what to trust anymore. But from what I gather about Matt, he claims to have been a subcontractor for NASA. I don't know if that's true. He claims to have been given this information sort of in jest at a cocktail party, and that's how he stumbled across the flat Earth. And what he did is he sort of did a comedy tour of sorts where he was sort of waking people up to the fact that they've been faking the globe through comedy, which I thought was brilliant. And he's also been apparently having NASA redress their images of so-called planet Earth and different planets from pictures to images or photo composites. Oh, and by the way, the old law that I was thinking of earlier was Magna Carta, which essentially means that all flowing water is free, the oceans belong to nobody, and so I'm just really curious to know who was pimping out slices of the oceans to the oil companies. I have a sneaking suspicion there's a Rothschild or a Rockefeller getting all those payments. But anyways.
I'll take globalization for 400, Alex. So, yeah, exactly. So,
anyways, but yeah. So in terms of Matt, you know, I believe what happened is I trusted a guy named Jeff Stewart. To you know, sort of be a liaison between Matt and I, and that was a mistake because it'll all come out in the wash. I'm going to have a documentary video that's sort of going to be subtitled "The New Flat World Order," which is the direction that I see everything going in if we continue with this mainstream path that labeling people as bigots and intolerant if they say I think gay marriage is oxymoron, for example. That's intolerant and bigotry now. In case you didn't know, and so
Well, again, it's the other side throwing rocks into the wheels and turning. What should come naturally is starting to get interrupted. But when I did litigation, that's exactly what happens is the opposing side throws a ball down the street, and when you're trying to defend the facts, you have to go chase their ball and say, wait a minute, you're out of bounds with what your argument is, and here's your ball back, and don't throw it anymore because it's not a valid item to bring up. People, and so now Mark, poor guy, he's spent every show is basically having him trying to indicate how open and transparent he is, and kind of lost. I mean, if you were to pick up where his story is right now, it's like, well, why is he having to defend himself for what he's talking about?
And my issue with Mark is simply one issue, is that he's pushed the flat Earth as a quote unquote Truman Show enclosed dome as the model. Since the beginning. I mean, that's his website is enclosedearth.com. His show is, it's all based on this Truman Show enclosed dome system, which, I've seen little evidence for. I don't,
right.
As far as I can tell, Matt may be 100% correct that the plane goes on up to and including infinity. I don't think that necessarily the path of the sun in its southernmost excursion should have any sort of indication on the edge of the Earth, if you can make the distinction.
Right. So from a technical standpoint, why are self-proclaimed or audience-proclaimed leaders based on YouTube video searches? I mean, that's I don't know. Again, ridiculous. And if you're going to throw out there that your concept is from a precision standpoint, we know it's accurate that it's not the globe, but from a precision standpoint, well, you've had enough time to start delving into it, support what your perception, and that's where I see things missing. But people like Jaron, and I'm not trying to promote or demote others, but people are out there legitimately trying to at least ascertain what is and isn't, and that's even a better way to approach it. What I used to do is not what do we have, it's what do we not have.
Right.
I mean, that's the whole reason I got into civil engineering was I knew all the things I didn't want to do, so that excluded me from so many different things that kind of the only options left my only option was engineering, but those who paid the bills indicated that, and civil engineering was the one that suited things, but I had to exclude all these others that the brain just didn't cooperate with public speaking was what I went into.
Memorization. I
God.
gotcha. But to me, and this has been since I woke up, after 9/11, is my whole thing has been against the New World Order. And I see the New World Order as a multifaceted agenda that includes all sorts of nefarious things that are led by, say the Illuminati, say the Masons, say the, elite, so whatever you want to call it. But there is this agenda, we'll call it the New World Order. And, frankly, I don't want it on a flat earth, and I don't want it on a round earth. I don't care, honestly, the shape of the earth is irrelevant to me so long as we don't have a future that is controlled by this New World Order. And if we allow ourselves to basically, continue along the same paths as we used to when we thought the earth was a globe, when we thought that, the Bible was a lie, or at least technically incorrect, when we thought that, infinite space, probably, aliens live on other planets, we can't continue down that same mindset where, well, there is no God, and therefore we can do whatever we want because we're just some chemical accident. That all sort of goes out the window, but that, to me, that was the New World Orders. That was sort of their whole hub, was based on this whole scientism as a ideology, or science as a religion. That's their whole thing. I mean, that's their number one thing they've got going for them. And if we continue along those same paths of, what's politically incorrect and what can we say publicly, and, our feelings should be bottled up and kept to ourselves if it's going to offend somebody, screw that. I don't want that on a flat earth, and I don't want that on a globe earth. And, that's just
Right.
my 2 cents.
I think it gets back to the paradigm of good versus evil, and evil knows that if you're trying to be honest and sincere, all you have to do is make a false accusation, and that person who's trying to be honest is going to defend themselves. And I can tell you from a personal standpoint that from since forever, that I was accused of being a liar, and that was within the friendly confines of your home.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, from the get-go, was having to defend just simple things. And by example, I was the one time that I recall that I was in our lunch boxes, we had snack packs, and I was a chocolate pudding snack pack kid, and my brother was apple pie. And for whatever reason that we ran out of the chocolate pudding, and I had my brother's apple pie, and someone took my lunch. And so I came back, and my father knew I didn't like apple pies, but I took it anyway, and I told him that, well, someone stole my lunch. He accused me of selling my lunch. And so it became a huge issue.
I know the issue. It's funny because when I was about, 16 or maybe 17 years old, I was working in a restaurant called Mykonos down in Florida. I was living with my dad, and we were closing up the restaurant one night, and 4 men, black dudes in masks with Tech 9s, came in, semi-automatic pistols, basically, came in through the back, robbed the place, and we had to wait for the police to come, give our statements to the detective, and so I was a couple hours late coming home, and boy, did I get it. And I was told that I made the whole thing up because I did this, that, and the other, when it was really all very much true. And it actually, he had to eat his socks when he saw it on the news later. So anyway, yeah. Accused me of lying, my own father. So there you go. So I know the feeling.
But that's just a tiny example of something that blew out of proportion, and I felt comfortable because I knew that wasn't the truth. But to be accused of it and defend myself, and again, I never talked back, and I was just horribly insecure, and I still am. It's just not to everyone. If there's a degree of credibility and honest integrity and everything else, I buckle like a wet noodle. But boy, come at me blind with false accusations. okay, and then what?
Right.
So, again, not saying Mr. Tough Guy or anything by any means. It's, I'm not going to chase every accusation down the street and defend myself, but I did. I spent going back 30 years defending not only what I was saying, but what other people were doing, and lost. So that's why I hate to see people start getting into these little wrestling matches that turn into Springer Show episodes between, knuckleheads and people earnestly trying to demonstrate their viewpoints and just getting attacked needlessly and continuously.
Yeah. Well, that's right, and that's all that's how the New World Order operates. They use the oldest trick in the book, which is divide and conquer. They use deception. It's the good old Hegelian dialectic, where you basically pit people against each other using false lies, slander, that sort of thing. And then you have people that are essentially pitted against each other to self-destruct the movement, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. But I don't think we should let them. I think that we should, band together and quit the petty squabbling and infighting. But that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So.
Right.
Yeah.
I just kicked into something. I don't know how to get out of it. Oh my gosh, how do I do this? Stop it.
What are you in your? Is it in like a?
I don't know. It's in
roll mode. There you go.
There we go. Anyway, we don't need to see that.
No worries.
What were we saying? Hey, can we take a quick 2-second?
Yeah.
I need to go refill and be right back.
That's fine. Yeah, I'm going to use the restroom. All right.
Okay. All right, I'm good.
Got me go. You already had your chicken.
Okay.
You already had your chicken, you little pig.
Excuse me?
Hey, no, sorry. I was talking to my cat.
It's like, wow. Anyway.
Okay, is my mic good? I want to make sure I'm not.
Yeah. Everything's
okay.
fine.
I've got it down low. That way, I don't want to be breathing into it because I know it picks up like everything. So.
No, I have empathy for anyone that has allergies and sinus issues, and it's bad enough to have
the worst. It's the total worst because I just can't stand not being able to breathe through my nose. A friend of mine, Lawrence Wright, I do the show every week. Well, usually on Sundays with him on This Week in Flat Earth. He sent me a bunch of essential oils, and one of them is Breathe Easy. And I'll tell you, you put a few drops of it into like a tissue and just breathe it in, and it really clears you right up. It's sort of like mentholatum, but it's all natural stuff. It's really good stuff. So anyway, if Lawrence watches this one day, then thank you, Lawrence. I'm actually using it now because man, I can't stand it. It's like suffocating through you.
The thing is, anyone that has any type of physical issues is the way that affects your concentration and, it just chips away at how much you can concentrate. And that was kind of one of the avenues I was trying to explain where, as I was doing all these field investigations, that as the body starts chipping away and not holding up, where, again, my brain's doing one thing and my mouth is writing checks that the body can't cash, and things were falling apart. And then to have people starting to accuse me of faking it was just the tip of the iceberg for a few things. But pain is, and I hate using that word, but pain is just one of those anomalies that, man, okay, pain is like, who's that? Cindy Crawford, or hopefully. It's like, that's pain, but the complete opposite, where your body's saying, hey, pay attention to me, and you have no choice in the matter, but it doesn't look like Cindy Crawford.
Yeah.
Anyway, so again, it's the environment that I'm in is I need something to concentrate on, and that's why I had the ability to dedicate a natural amount of time looking at the NASA eclipse data, was because needing something to concentrate on. And that kind of goes back to I fell into the, hey, what else is really going on in the world, was after my back surgery. Once I got Social Security and all that drama I kind of yacked about yesterday right at the end, when I finally got the insurance, that I had, the first one was knee surgery, and then neck surgery, and then another knee surgery, then then a back fusion, and after the back fusion, and all this was within 16 months, that after the back fusion I needed something to do, and started looking into the events of 9/11, because Dr. Corley turned out to be a principal investigator on it. And I may have known at the time, but being laid up, I certainly had more time to look into it. And from the beginning, understanding what short period of time he was out there and the declarations that were made, got me interested in what was going on, and the dominoes started falling, where you look at the Pentagon and everything, plane disappeared, and not only did it disappear, it fit through a less than a 20-foot hole. And again, we all know the stories, and it's, each of these stories are like a pizza, and it's just not a cheese pizza. That the complexity is so multifarious that it gets outrageous, and people want to have everything simplified, and you just can't. You can't come out and say, prove 9/11 was not what the official record says. It's, to me, like, well, you just asked for a piece of pizza and you want nothing on it, and I can't do that. I have to give you a bunch of different pizzas and you put them together, and then you'll have your pizza, but I just can't give you a cheese pizza. And
the thing is the official story, and including the official accounts of the engineers that are, we're not talking about the engineers for truth. We're talking about the official official people that are investigating this, or that contributed to the official 9/11 Commission report. obviously got a
Well,
lot
it's
wrong.
changed. It's changed because originally Dr. Corley was the author of the pancake theory.
Okay.
And I don't know, I mean, you can make your jokes with the Betty Crocker School of Engineering or whatever, but, you know, this whole pancake theory of the whole thing collapsing, and there's no seismic data to show of a mass hitting the ground and at free fall speed, that things just, for lack of technical words, evaporate into a fine silty dust. I mean, good grief. And I do remember in the hallway, or I ran into Dr. Corley, and this is kind of a side issue, is he also sailed. And I was in a show, Strictly Sail, when I was showing some of the illustrations I did, and Dr. Corley was there, and he kind of looked at me like, hey, you look like my barber or someone I used to work with. But I think there were some medical issues going on, because I just found out a couple days ago that he had died of cancer in 2013.
Oh, really?
So I don't think it was any secret that he had some medical issues going back. And when I saw him, it was just one of those where he recognized me because I worked with him for 13 years, but he couldn't quite put the placement.
Yeah.
And not that I changed a lot physically, but and I remember addressing it, and he goes, yeah, it's amazing what can happen, and just way oversimplified. And again, it's when, you know, he certainly, I'm sure, took his beating when, you know, the more time went on and people starting to listen to what he was saying, that the pancake theory disappeared a couple years later, and by 2005 there was another theory being thrown around. And then obviously the controlled demolition aspect got into the mix, but again, it wasn't conclusive. And from a deception standpoint, if I were to pull that thing off, I'd put a bunch of false flag or signature items that, even though that the earmark was there, that
sort of misinformation, sort of, yeah.
Right. Again, I was in a controlled demolition project in Topeka, where the CDI, Controlled Demolition Incorporated, was the demolition firm, and they took down either 14 or 18-story building built in the 30s, and the top of it was a 50, 60-story building, and it was just the top 16, 18, or 14, 18 floors of the structure. And structure in its entirety was either in New York or Chicago. But anyway, so they took down this building, and you had the plumes of smoke, you know, the little puffs. And you could, you know, everyone's seen that from the 9/11 footage. And anyone that spent a earnest amount of time reviewing the collapse, you know, people that really want to try and figure this out, I don't doubt that they've looked at that hundreds of times over and over and over. And from an evaluation standpoint is, you can look at something over and over and over and still keep finding new things.
Well, and there's even good evidence out there. I don't know if you've seen, and I'm sort of on the fence with this, but there's a lot of people out there that believe that no planes actually ever hit the towers, and that those were actually just CGI added into the news media later on. Now, I don't know about that. There's people that even go so far as to say that nobody died that day, that the buildings were empty.
That's a
right.
bold statement, but I'm 100% in the camp of no planes.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
you know, the thing is my theory is, and this sort of, you can take this conversation all the way back to the Titanic disaster, but my theory is that specific key people were probably invited to breakfast on the uppermost floors of the towers that day, and that's why we saw the, you know, events unfold the way that they did, because our financial system, I don't know if anyone noticed this, but our our entire stock exchange has changed since then, from where you had lots and lots of people selling and trading stocks to now it's just done by robots, computer programs. So you've got an entire section of the money system that was very much scandalous, that was very much corrupt, that is still just as corrupt, but only run by a handful of people instead of thousands of people. So they achieved what they wanted to achieve and consolidated everything even further.
Right. Well, we all know about PNAC, and in order to expedite that whole scenario was basically a Pearl Harbor type event, and they certainly got their wish. So again, 9/11 is like any arson investigation, that the events of the day are not as significant as everything that happened before and after. Yep. And earnestly I put in at least 300 hours, and that's 30 days at 10 hours, which is way under what was really going on. But I put in a good month looking at every aspect I could, and I was so appalled by it that my knee-jerk reaction was to kind of disseminate those items any way possible.
Well, and another big issue is, of course, the money trail, which the official 9/11 Commission report deemed that it wasn't really relevant to follow the money trail, where if they would have done that, I submit that they probably would have found that the whole thing was funded by the likes of CIA proxy groups and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a little bit further down in detail than I've kind of looked into, but all the trading before with the short trades and betting on what the stocks are going to do, all the military supply contractors, how they made out, and the airlines. There's still millions and millions of dollars left on the table that people did those short bets and everything that didn't come out of the woodwork because the eyes started to fall on them that, hey, there's some shady trading going on. And when I looked into it, it was, hundreds of percent that United Airlines and American Airlines stock traded on that Monday. Between Thursday the week before and Monday, that the volume of shares being traded for the airlines was phenomenal. Yeah. So you had that spike. Obviously, someone knows what's going on.
Well, a lot of
but you throw in
bets too. Yeah.
Right. So why all of a sudden do you have this spike in trading and just happen to have? I mean, the coincidences are it's like the July 7th explosions in the UK, that they just happen to have all the people in the right places at the right time during a drill, and a live event goes off at the exact same locations. And not only just one location, it's 5 locations. It's oh my God, how stupid.
They were doing a live drill.
Oh, yeah, right. And it's, a drill going on, and hey, everyone meet over at in front of the 666, I remember it was just 666, the library. Was it the Boylston? It was the library. So the news, one of the news agencies said the live drill's going on. They send out the electronic communication, and even that gets put out there, and people are just like, nope, it happened, and oh my gosh, it's horrible, and Boston strong, and hey, you got the BS portion right, but it doesn't stand for Boston strong.
Yeah. And the only reason I remember that is because I actually was going to. I ended up attending Shenandoah University. I majored at in guitar.
Really?
But I was going to go to Berkeley. Not Berkeley in California, but Berkeley in Boston, which is on Boylston Street. And so that's the only reason that sort of stuck in my brain when I saw that the event occurred on 666 Boylston Street at the library. It would have been right down the street where I was considering going to college, but I ended up going to Virginia anyway. Wow, yeah, that looks like a big accident.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that happens all the time out there because there's so damn many of them.
Yeah, that's called Tuesday. Right. So, yeah, it's going back to 9/11, you got the whole hurricane issue and that being offshore, and And so I think there's so much supportive evidence that with Judy Wood and others. Now, is she the directed energy? No, who's the gal with the directed energy weapon?
Well, I think Judy Wood is a proponent for that. Yeah,
Is
Dr.
Judy?
Judy
Okay.
Wood. Yeah, she wrote a book called "Where Did the Towers Go?" That's excellent. You can see some of her stuff on YouTube that covers some of the basic points, which I think she's onto something. I really do. I agree that the seismic data is very compelling. That's a fact that you can't get around. It means that all that tonnage of steel and concrete never hit the ground. And there's really no weapon known to man, especially not an airplane, that can cause steel to turn into dust while it falls. Now, could they have doctored the videotapes that we're all so familiar with? I guess they probably could have, but as far as I know, lots of people saw the towers go down, and lots of seismic recorders were going off at that time, and they sensed a little something, but nothing in near the magnitude that should have been attributed to those giant towers falling.
Right. If people want to go down and start looking at the no plane theory, there's been some pretty spectacular videos of people dissecting the videotape, and they've done again independently and several times over by different sources, have really broken down how all the different layering and masking that goes on, and there's a plane in, plane out video that really demonstrates how I think it's the Fox News footage from, I'm going to get my directions goofy, but they do a pan in, pan out, then a pan in, and through that series of going back and forth where the plane should have been, it's not there, and then you see the explosion. So,
yeah, well, and the way that I see it is, and you probably could speak to this better than I could, but I would imagine a plane that's built light, that's built mainly out of aluminum and as light materials as possible. If it was to actually hit that solid steel reinforced concrete structure, it would have basically would, to me, I would have thought that it would have sort of at least bounced off a little bit and just deflected. I don't think that it should have cut through the frickin' Twin Towers like butter.
Sometimes you're the bug, sometimes you're the windshield.
Really?
But
yeah.
I guess sometimes the bug is a little bit stronger than the windshield. Well, down in Texas and Louisiana, the bug is bigger than the windshield. Because, well, I've hit cockroaches on the highway. They're like speed bumps, and so
I submit it's possible that there could have been no planes, and that there could have been some sort of initial bombs that went off in specific key floors. And I believe that this was made possible by the Bush family, because George Bush's brother actually ran security. He was the CEO or something of the
Marvin
there you go.
Bush.
Marvin was a CEO or whatever, head of security for the Twin Towers at the time. You have all these connections to be made, so it's pretty obvious if you do. I mean, we can't prove any of this, but again, when something's blatant in front of your face and you see the motive, you see what their plans were, you know, with the whole PNAC, New Pearl Harbor thing, and you see these, you know, planes doing what planes couldn't possibly do, especially in Pennsylvania. What hit the Pentagon, there was footage of that, 2 or 3 frames. That obviously wasn't a plane. So, you know, to anyone that's paying attention, there's major, major problems with 9/11. And someone like yourself was apparently a pretty vocal, you know, sort of vocal proponent for 9/11 truth in the engineering communities.
Well, I'd rather just show than discuss. But I mean, anyone that wants to look into or that debates the events of, take 2, that wants to debate and defend the official record, if you don't spend 30 minutes into trying to understand the official narrative and realize how not even scientifically impossible, it's just the absurdity of what is claim to have happened. You're a damn fool if you say that there's a plane in Pennsylvania or at the Pentagon.
Well, I think the plane in Pennsylvania was shot down, and whether it had people on it or not, maybe it did, but I definitely don't think it crashed steeply into the ground and then exploded.
That was not the crash site for a plane.
Yeah, well, it was. It looked to me like it was probably shot down by the military.
But there's Google Earth maps that show that same scar years before the event.
Oh, really?
I think it's been taken down now, but someone did some what's it called when you
like go to the archives, right?
The archives, so they had the same scar in the Earth from a earlier rendition of Google Earth.
Wow.
So that was already there. So it's already, I mean, again, if you start jumping up and down saying, boy, the official story is true, you better realize what you're defending, because it's utter nonsense. And these people, I don't think there's anything more pathetic in the world than a liar when they get caught.
Yeah.
Because then it's, it's just, you're going to get your Lance Armstrong minute. There's no doubt. And these people that start to voice themselves defending the ludicrous, you're going to have your Lance Armstrong minute, and I will have no pity whatsoever. And again, from a personal standpoint, when I try to not only defend myself, but to indicate where my accusations were not only substantiated with witnesses and everything else, that this person was going to do anything in his realm to destroy a person's life, no matter what, with every resource and person available to help him. And under no uncertain terms is this going to happen for people that have lived their entire life on a lie. And when I have a hard time using him as a father, but Miles, I almost went to a point of figuring out how to support him after the truth came out, because I know that person was going to be absolutely devastated, and everything he's done, all the lies are going to be recognized, and that person will not have an ounce of sympathy or empathy on the planet. So I was going to be the one trying to figure out how to rush in and say, look, you did what you did. It's, repent what you did. They're not going all Moses biblical on you, but you're going to have to atone for what you did, and do it now while you've got a chance, because, boy, this is part one. You get one chance. Part two, it's over.
It's always, and I've always learned that it's better to, just be truthful, even if it's embarrassing. Just be truthful. You don't have to worry about later on trying to remember what you said. It's better just to be honest and be truthful and own up to your mistakes than it is to have it come out later that, you somehow knowingly did wrong or did somebody wrong and never fessed up to it, never owned up to it. And even taking it a step further, you'll see instances where instead of owning up to their wrongdoings, they try to sort of spin the accusations onto other people. So, yep.
Right. I'm trying to go into what I did from where I went back and thought, well, how can I get this information to a group of people that can not only use it, though it's going to affect them and they're going to take interest in it because of how much it affects their lives. So what my tiny little brain put together was to address school newspapers at different universities. So I created a database of all the college and university newspapers in the United States and wrote each one of them. Bear with me. Can we take another quick break?
Sure, yeah. No
Sorry
worries.
about that. I had it lined up, and my brain is not keeping up with what I'm trying to. My mouth is
No,
running
that's
away
fine. I
here.
think we're doing good, and yeah, I think it's a good point to let's merge into. Let's talk about sort of what you did with sending
Yep.
out the info to the universities. You can talk a little bit about that, and then maybe go into the story about the what was it, a state senator or some sort of local representative that you had the conflict with. And if we can try to do all this,
Here we
I know
go.
it's a lot. Maybe try
Yeah.
to do it within the next hour. That would be awesome. That way we'll try to keep it to around 2 if we can.
Oh yeah. We're good. I just need I did too much coffee already.
No, you're
so,
fine. Take a
yep.
break, and we'll come back in just a couple. I'll just leave it running. No worries. Okay.
Okay.
It's almost like like Vicks, kind of like mentally, but it's natural essential oils, and it really really works. But then after a couple minutes it wears off, and I'm just wondering if it's like does more harm than good by irritating my sinuses. I don't know.
Oh jeez.
But we'll continue on, and I'll try to maintain my non-nasalness as possible. And
oh no, it's nice background. It's nice background music, white noise for my narrative.
I snore too when it's so. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I do snore. My wife hates. My wife. I'll wake up with the elbow in my ribs frequently. So.
During the MAC race, we had, you've got 14 people or 12, 14 people on a boat, and we'd always have the guys that would saw, one guy's nickname was Chainsaw because of the way he snored. And, anyway, I can't remember, I spent over 300 hours at least before I thought I have to do something and make sure that I was so well grounded with what I was going to do. And again, this was post-surgery, so my mobility was somewhat confined. But one of the things I remember is not talking to other people about it, where I had that invisible dome, for lack of better analogies, of not running around and talking to other people what I discovered, but I would creep it into conversations to see how people address things. And again, the people at the time, they started to recognize that I was involved with something because, again, it gets into personally what was going on. Then all of a sudden, post-op, I had all my attention drawn, and I became a little bit more reclusive because I was so dedicated to understanding the events and what information was out there to understand what happened. So I told people, because of my relationship with Dr. Corley and my background in field investigations, that I had an independent person approach me, which is true, approach me, and they wanted me to do an assessment of the events of 9/11. So that was the story I told people, that I was, again, now approached by a person to look into this, and I used that as a way to slowly disseminate what I was finding. But that met resistance right away, and realized that was not the audience to start becoming a educator, and by no means am I a orator, so it should be fairly evidenced at this point. So the only way I could channel the energy was to find an audience that might take interest in this because of how much it would affect their lives. So that's where I developed the database for all the college newspapers in the United States, and it turned out to be around, the number I remember is 486 newspapers. And taking it a step further from an engineering standpoint was the absurdity of the FEMA ASCE report that Dr. Corley authored, And while you're there, if you want to start looking into screenshots, I should have done that.
No, it's fine.
Bear with. And as you can see, Dr. Corley in one of these. But yeah, this was what he authored. This is what Dr. Corley authored. And when I saw that, I couldn't even get through 2 paragraphs without just violently ill. I'm not kidding. It was the absurdity of not only what was done, but you step back and realize the world took what he was saying and ran with it. And you get to, and people are going to go, well, attacking the guy and he's dead. You know what? Look how many people died because of, he was the stepping, from a lot of standpoints, he was the stepping stone that allowed this whole perversity in mankind to continue.
Yeah. Well, we never, we probably wouldn't have had the ongoing war on terrorism if it hadn't have been for people that were willing to sell out, such as, if that's what he did.
That's he was a public international voice, and whenever something happened in Chicago, let alone regional or national or even international, that he became a voice. In Chicago, I think he had a contract with the CBS network, and he was interviewed numerous times when, remember you may not know, but in Chicago, there was a construction going on in the Chicago River, and they punched through the coal tunnels that ran through the city. And actually, I was lucky to be part of that project, and I'll try and walk and chew gum here at the same time. Anyway, so there's this, they punched through and all these buildings downtown Chicago flooded. And during this event, as all the water's rushing into these coal tunnels that line for miles and miles and miles. How do I get out of this? Bear with me. He was interviewed to give his opinion on what was going on, and it took about a day for this collapsed tunnel to get plugged up to stop flooding all the buildings.
Wow.
And I'll look for City of Chicago. Here we go. I can show better than
sure,
talk.
Yeah, no, that's fine. City Hall coal tunnel collapse.
Yeah. So this is the Chicago River. Lake Michigan's over here, and this is the branch, the north-south split. And construction work was going on around here, and the contractor punched through these coal tunnels. Now, these coal tunnels were an underground system network that ran underneath the State Street, and the Randolph is around here. So it was an XY grid of tunnels that you could stand up in with little coal cars that would distribute coal to all these main buildings downtown for fuel. And so there's this old abandoned artery underground, and when the tunnel was breached, there was a massive whirlpool here as that tunnel system filled up. And so everyone was throwing the mattresses. I think someone did a commercial on, hey, we supply 400 mattresses, and that's not 400. Forgot to divide by 12. That they were just throwing raw mattresses, brand new mattresses, trying to take advantage of the suction power of this whirlpool to plug up the breach. But anyway, so I was hired. Well, CTL was hired, and they wanted me to go down and take a core sample because the City Hall building was at the time 120, 30 years old. So all this concrete that had not seen any moisture for over 100 years, all of a sudden was saturated, and it was falling apart like paste. And I went down there with a 3-foot core barrel and pulled out gravel. And that was it. That was the end of our job. But
you couldn't have paid me enough to go down there. I'll be like, no, thank you.
Oh, it was. I mean, there are fish all over the place, and there's an abandoned 2-story, 30 by 30 oil tank, rectangular. And when the water filled up in the sub-basement, probably 30, 40 feet below, as the water filled up that sub-basement, it became buoyant, ripped out at the anchor bolts, and shot through another floor. So this thing popped up. So it's like a big swimming pool of all these things going on, but they were at massive scale. It was kind of neat for a dumb guy.
And it looks like they've got a real great bridge system there, because I've never understood. You've got these huge cities with one bridge in and out. That makes a lot of sense to me, to have all those bridges going over that river. Just that's just the observation.
Well, Chicago's a city that grew proportionally from a nucleus outward. You get some other areas like Houston that just grew up from all over the place because they didn't have zoning laws. And trying to put a mass transit system into a system that didn't grow naturally and just popped up anywhere. It's like playing whack-a-mole, trying to get a system that unites everyone. So again, this was one of the paths when we used to put the boat in the water for race season. It was going through all these series of bridges and plowing through here. And, that was an event, but side story.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I kind of forgot why we got on this. So the voice of Dr. Corley. And again, I'm not, well.
So let me make sure.
Authority gone bad. Let's just call it what it is just erroneous. I mean, erroneous to an exponential degree of misleading, and that was a stepping stone to allow the deception to continue. And as the deception continues, it grows and grows and grows and grows, and then it becomes such a massive enigma to take down that force becomes a bigger task, instead of just cutting it off at the bud. And had a proper investigation been done with a metallurgy and looking at what the evidence showed and not what people were telling you, then it would have been clear that no planes, planes disappear, but passports don't. And it just gets into, I would be the guy that came up with that story because I'm a knucklehead. And no one listens to me, but to understand that the authorities were saying that, 19 guys with the box cutters did this, and it gets into such a degree of absurdity. It's like, my God, people are either stupid or don't care. Pick. You're one of the two.
The other thing too is you had a drill going on that day with NORAD, the North American whatever the air defense is, whatever that stands for, NORAD, where the first respond or the quick response jets were basically not, they didn't know whether it was a drill or whether it was reality. And so that's why I think that they finally, they may have gotten a fourth plane, whether it was filled with people or not, I don't know. But that's why I think that they did shoot down one. But it's all very speculative, and to me it's good enough to show that the mainstream account of it was wrong, and we don't necessarily need to prove what happened. We just need to prove that there's a bunch of lying going on, and these people need to get the hell out of our government.
Well, that's trying to get people to the starting point is going to be a task, and it's been a 14, 15-year task at that. So, again, for someone to start immediately taking the defense that, oh, the official narrative is true and you're a nut job for thinking otherwise, well, you lost.
Yep.
You lose. And, you're not even ready for the adult table.
That's right, yep.
And giving some people a voice at the adult table is pushing the points of just sanity at.
So now his performance on this, when there was this breach, so essentially, y'all had to wait on his assessment in order to move, or
no,
what was?
He was called in from the local networks to give his opinion on what was going on.
So he was just sort of a mouthpiece for the. Okay. So it's almost as if his career wasn't so much as being an engineer or as trying to figure out.
No, don't. You're taking things to extremes. A portion of what he did was to give a narrative when a civil engineering related news item came up. So, but on staff that he was a senior principal, vice president, and he was intimately involved with certain projects. I mean multiple projects. And one of his side things was being a voice and authoritarian from civil engineering standpoint is when events like the collapse of this coal tunnel came up that they wanted. Local news wanted to get his assessment of what was going on. So again, not you, John, but I don't want the.
I'm just trying to understand if you felt whether his assessment and handling of the situation, as with whatever his capacity was it adequate? What do you feel that it was?
Well, it's ex post facto to begin with.
Just your assessment, though. I mean, was he on point? Was he just totally, off base, or what do you think?
Just comparing to the Amtrak, that Amtrak became a PhD research project by just looking at 6 bolts or 8 bolts, whatever were there. So you get into the chain of custody and the litigation and the non-destructive and destructive testing of material samples compared to the collapse of 210-story buildings and the collapse of another 47-story building, and to go out there and have extraordinarily limited access to the site only days after it happened and come back with a declarative statement of what happened and label it with a pancake theory, it's, you don't need my opinion on that. It's not apples and oranges. It's apples and spaghetti, whatever.
All right. So I guess we covered this point, and if you wanted to, I'm not sure if we ever did wrap up on the sort of work that you did getting in touch with the different college newspapers and.
So I wrote this letter and used it as the foundation I addressed this organization and Pilots for 9/11 Truth and wrote them. And again, this is 300-hour-old information and kind of how did we get to this point. There's a page 2, but it's, what was said is kind of irrelevant versus my approach was to try and disseminate what I was seeing to people who also shared it, and then to what do we do with this, who do we tell it to. So I decided to approach the student newspapers and use this as a foundation, and through multiple mail correspondence to lay out the foundation to what occurred and why there should be the official narrative be stricken and a full independent third-party multiple investigation over what happened. And this was through a series. I sent 2 discs per correspondence, or not, per the entire effort, I sent 2 discs over probably 6 to 8 mailings.
Okay.
And what I didn't finish in thought was the other people I contacted were the civil engineering departments at all these universities. So if out of the 486 newspapers, only a fraction of those, over 50%, had civil engineering programs. So concurrent with addressing the newspapers, I wrote all of the department heads in the companies, and the third layer to it was the professors that were overseeing the Chi Epsilon honorary civil engineering fraternity.
Okay.
So through all of this effort, there were probably 400 or 980 mailings that went out repeatedly to address the events of 9/11, saying something here is worth looking into. Don't, the old Jeranism, don't listen to me, but follow what I'm saying and look into it, because this is not only affecting our lives, it's affecting the world in the future.
Well, I think that's so important because, especially, now it's sort of something that we can talk about and we don't get shunned and trolled from every direction. But, 10 years ago, and I'm not sure exactly when you did all of this, I'm assuming it was within a couple of years.
2012, I
Okay.
started the mass mailing started in March, and I tried to follow the primary campaign as far as sending things out, because trying to light a spark where when people were going to the candidates were going to different states was to put an emphasis in the colleges in that region to try and get a spark of interest to start addressing and approaching these candidates to get them to at least respond to the issue, let alone address what's going on.
Well,
So
I think that's really admirable, because first of all, if you can get this information in front of one person that otherwise wouldn't have considered it, then to me that's a score, that's a victory. And I'm sure that by repeated and there is something more to physically getting a package in the mail with a disc and piece of paper than there is getting an email. I mean, there is definitely something to that. People can ignore emails all day long, but if there's if there's an envelope with the package inside on your desk, you're going to open it. And so, I think that was a great way to get that out and get that in front of people. And thanks for doing that, because now 3 years later, I'm sure that it's had an impact, because look how much more, mainstream this whole 9/11 truth thing has become.
Well, I always wondered, not by anything that I might have done, but the whole scenario with Dr. Corley, it's one of those that if someone were to say that Dr. Corley woke up one day and someone approached him and said, "Hey, guess what? You have cancer." And guess what? You're not going to make it for very long. And because right around 2013 was when certain pockets of the 9/11 truth movement were starting to escalate with a louder and louder voice. And all of a sudden they took out, okay, I strike that. One of the key players, suddenly dies of cancer. I think there are other health issues that were more pronounced and more known, but cancer was what was on the epitaph that I saw a couple days ago.
Well, from what I gather, and this is sort of, and I think it's provable, but there's a specific combination of drugs that have been known to be used by certain nefarious, like government agencies, we'll say the alphabet agencies, where the person ingests one thing and nothing happens, but within a certain amount of time, if they ingest this other substance, and I don't know what the two names are, but they can sort of get this fast-acting cancer that I want to say something along the line of succinylcholine, but I think maybe I'm confusing things. At any rate, it has been sort of at least postulated that these government agencies have a way to basically, take people out with a fast-acting cancer, and, the person that was essentially taken out that way never would have known it. It could have been 2 meals they had on 3 different days. You know what I mean? So anyway.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all. Going back.
And again, that's all just hypothesis. I'm not saying that is what happened, but you never know.
Right. This was, well, I'll get into. This was the setup I had for, these are all the mass mailings going out, and each of them had a letter that went out. Again, I'd go to, this is from Pentwater, Michigan, too. Like Plaquemine, that population 600 in the winter and 1,200 or so in the summer. And I'd go down to the post office, and Fred was there, and I'd get $900 worth of stamps.
Holy.
So it's like, so it got around kind of like, why is this guy buying all these stamps? And so again, my background or my story was that I was approached to look into the investigation of 9/11 from an outside standpoint because of my relationship of being Dr. Corley's fact-finding witness for 13 years as not the only fact-finding witness, but certainly I don't think anyone would contend that I wasn't one of the primary ones, just by, the number of projects that I worked under him directly for. And he was very, very much hands-off for all the work I did with him. I'd let him know what I was going to do and everything, but he was like, sounds good, go out there. And with the Amtrak bridge collapse was go down there and just document all the pieces. So as they pulled out the pieces, went out there and documented the, twisted, all the twisted shapes and the evidence where bolts were present in the pedestals. And then he flew down and walked the site and said, I want that sample, I want that sample, because his brilliance was that because he was the one that was going to testify and give his opinion, is that he had to formulate the story he was going to tell in court. So when he came down and started, there's a big, massive concrete pedestal, and he goes, I want the surveying plat. What's it called? The USGS surveying plat. There's a little copper plate on top of the pedestal to show what elevation it was. So he said, yeah, I want the core sample of that. So it just was an outrageous request because from the guy who had to do it, because I was like, well, why do you want that? Because we have to get up 13 feet or 15 feet with a core rig and drill in an angle. And he's like, just get me the sample from that. So, but he knew in his mind that he wanted that for his story. So, not that I was questioning, well, I guess I kind of said I did question why, but it was more like, are you absolutely sure you need that?
Right, okay.
And it was, yeah, I need that for what I'm looking into. So again, he was hands off, but when he got involved, he would tell you what he needed, and that was your task to get what he needed to tell his story.
So it seems to you almost as if he's framing the evidence around the hypothesis.
I think I'm just going to come out and say it that he was told what to say.
Yeah, and that's based on evidence of him framing hypotheses. I mean, framing facts around his hypotheses as opposed to following the truth to lead to the hypotheses, essentially.
Yeah, he was. There's no doubt in my mind, because I would not work for a company, let alone an individual that was to a degree of illegitimate as one would suggest for a person to come out and make such blatant, erroneous conclusions without any type of sound evaluation whatsoever. So there's no doubt in my mind that he was told to be a mouthpiece, and I'll even go out with absolutely no foundation and say that if he didn't do that then he had family, and he was certainly a family person, that his life would have been destroyed.
Well,
and there's no doubt
there's
in my mind
I'm sure that there's that aspect to it, and I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out that the dude was a Freemason or was involved with some of these brotherhoods, and if that's the case,
I can't support that. You can say whatever you want, but I can't support any kind of conversation that includes that, because I have no foundation for that.
What I would say is I would hypothesize that if he was involved in some sort of Freemasonry, then if that's the case, then they have certain oaths that they must fulfill, which includes towing the line. And a lot of times they have blackmail and bribery involved and stuff like that. So there may have been more to it, or he could have been, just simply threatened. So, we'll probably never know. So we will move on.
We will never know. So this was my support staff, and just a awful typist, and trying to get anything out of them was ridiculous.
I bet they're good at doing dishes, though.
No, it's, and their excuse is opposable thumb. It's like, if I had $1 every time I hear opposable thumb, then I started realizing that means the dog's telling me it doesn't have it. So, anyway.
If you put the dishes in a row on the ground, no, I'm kidding.
No, it race was someone that they would call, they'd use their dog as a dog pre-wash and whatever. This was Bailey, and so they'd say that before they put dishes in the dishwasher, that they'd do a Bailey pre-wash, and the dog would lick the plate, and the plate was probably cleaner before it went in than after.
Yeah, I don't know about all that, but pretty bad. Remind me not to go have dinner over at their house. No, I'm totally kidding.
So again, not to get the thing is, this was just I had to release energy somehow, some way. And I had rented office space downtown Pentwater, and this was my setup here for all this. And I probably went through, the whole thing was in 5 figures, that I used all my Social Security money this is all toner, and this is about $100 a pop for all this. And I just was going through volumes and volumes of prints for all these productions, because I wanted to make it sound like it was a massive effort.
I don't think you need to make it sound like it. It seems like it was a pretty massive effort to me. I mean, just based on...
No. From the other side, that I wanted the newspapers to get the impression that this was a massive production getting thrown out, because, again, here's a stack of discs that I would include with, like, the PNAC report and the official ASCE FEMA report, and that's what I included on the informational discs, let alone the papers. I had a petition to have the licenses for all the engineers that signed off on the 9/11 Commission's report. Now, I never mentioned Dr. Corley by name, because the people I went after were the ones that, again, signed off on the 9/11 Commission's report, and not Dr. Corley, because at this point, 2012, his story was already stricken from acceptability. So I kind of did a 2 degrees of separation from anyone suggesting I'm attacking him, and my direct reproach was on the individuals involved with the so-called end of investigations, were 2007 was the hearings were. Again, just looking into the 9/11 Commission report, the hearings themselves were a joke, and again, it's like, who believes this stuff? And again, it's like, wow, Honey Boo Boo was popular when that was going on, and yeah, I can see why people are more interested in Honey Boo Boo.
Well, and
then,
it's like,
then
yeah,
what's your
it's like when you see the
oh,
videotape of the police officer shooting a guy in the back as he runs away, but yeah, then he'll go on the witness stand and say, well, I was in fear of my life, and well, okay, and then he's he gets a couple weeks off with pay, and then it's back to work as usual. So of course, in the same respect, the government trying to investigate the 9/11 Commission report is just as big a joke.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So here I mapped out all the universities that I was contacting, and there's pin designation for the ASCE and the Chi Epsilon fraternities. And what else? Anyway, so I got so mad at this that I came back after I went out to California to visit a friend, and I was so intimate with this effort, and I knew it was going nowhere because I ended up putting the FBI as a return address. I heard from no one. I probably had $4,000 in postage and heard absolutely nothing, so something was going on, and I'm guessing that anything that did come into my name at Petwater Post Office was just snagged up.
Yeah.
How can you send out thousands of mailings with this information and hear back from zero? So I got kind of fed up, and I got to take a quick break.
I would add just real quick that, the whole thing after 9/11, and one of the big pieces of agenda they wanted to push was the Patriot Act, which involves domestic spying and essentially allowing the government carte blanche authority to essentially label anyone they choose as a domestic terrorist without any sort of proof, without any sort of trial or due process, and essentially strikes our God-given rights, our constitutional rights, with a single act called the Patriot Act, which is sort of a slap in the face in and of itself. But we can take a break on that. I actually could run to the bathroom real quick myself, so if you want to take a quick 5, and we're at the 2-hour mark, so if we can maybe try to keep the remainder of it to about 30 minutes if possible, that'd be awesome. Okay.
All right. Good enough. So yeah, this is kind of the exclamation point for all the background I've been yakking at so far, because this is where I started getting my personal life mating with what was going on from the 9/11 stuff, and it was clash of worlds, because going back to what happened to me in 2007.
I love the Mr. Coffee way in the background. That's great. Mr. Coffee, it's up towards the top right. It's just a sort of funny thing.
Oh, I went through coffee pots. I got my $13 worth, but tying together that going back to 2007, and we kind of wrapped it up last night, at the very end last night, of what was going on personally, where I had a job. I was back on the civil engineering market and had this incredible opportunity in Chicago. So I was driving from Petwater back to Chicago for this new job, and concurrent with that was all these personal things going on behind my back, where my family crept back into the picture and got together with my wife's family and maintained the story of my paranoid, schizophrenic, drug addiction, alcoholic background. My then wife had been through her third job of being fired for stealing pain meds.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm just going to lay it out, because they had no problem disseminating lies that were so extraordinary. I have no problem publicly talking about the truth of what happened. So I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. I'm screaming up and down from being run over that bus and back and forth repeatedly for years, and finally trying to get out what happened. And people will believe whatever they want to believe. And that's a whole nother part of the picture, is once people realize that all these accusations were false, then they double down on, based on what we were told. It's like, well, wait a minute. I was the guy that that was absolutely shunned from everybody while, bodies breaking down. I'd lost 2 inches in physical height because I had to work high school jobs at $8 an hour when I was being investigated for insurance fraud from Social Security because people were going around saying I faked knee surgeries.
Oh my God.
And I couldn't even get enough money to get x-rays. And when they thought they had me for insurance fraud, they had me go down to Muskegon for x-rays, probably ready to file charges on me, and they took x-rays, and they said, well, wait a minute, the guy's got hardware in both knees and his back. So then the Social Security item came to a halt and went through denial and everything else, but the fraud investigation stopped.
Right.
This is where the narrative of lies going out, and the only reason I brought all this up was that when I approached an individual for what they did back decades ago, and had that not grown to affect the first failed marriage, it affected the second failed marriage because, found someone that had bigger issues than I did. Things, and I didn't want to be a hypocrite and criticize, but it turned out that, my pain meds were missing all the time. Confronted her while she went to her father, ex-Chicago cop, union tile president, and so after they took me out with a drug interaction, put me in the hospital because I didn't know what was going on. So I lost the house, lost the job, lost everything, and on the street because people decided to take the story of me lying and fabricating this orthopedic issue and saying, boy, the guy
when it all turned out to be true after all. And it's that's how they do for any sort of Social Security or even insurance claim. I was literally hit by a car on my motorcycle. The guy ran a red light, and it took me almost a year to get my insurance settlement, which was all in all, it was a total of about little less than $25,000, and 15 of that went to the hospital, 9 of that went to the lawyer, and so I was left with maybe a couple $1,000s after it was all said and done, and that's just because I took I took an offer that would pay off the medical bills, which were ridiculous, and pay off my attorney. But yeah, they make it a policy to deny, and if they can attack your credibility, they will try. And I'm glad that you ultimately won the day, at least in terms of the investigation, the fraud investigation. Because God, I mean, what a thing to know that you're right the whole time and finally have your day in court and be proven to be truthful. So
well, the lawyer I hired for the advocate, that she not came after me, but after the trial or the hearing, she goes, you have to admit that your story was pretty far out there with that many surgeries. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? And what my fan club did was say, look, the guy's making up such an outrageous story, no one's going to believe him. And I go, well, that's exactly what Miles is doing with his whole POW story. So again, the irony, and I thought having facts and truth on my side would prevail, but oh my God, nothing but. So, going back to
your medical records are all documented. I mean, if you call
they were lost. I mean, a lot of them were lost in the house foreclosure. And what happened there was, after I got taken out with the five days in semi-comatose, where I didn't know what was going on, when I came out of it from the drug interaction, I had a brain stroke. I didn't find out about that till a year later. But after I came out of this 5-day daze, they had found a cop, the Pentwater police, and went back to the house, and the wife told him what was going on, so they decided to take me to another hospital. They did brain scans and MRIs and x-rays. They didn't really find anything, so they took me down to the Hackley Behavioral Health down in Muskegon, and ended up spending 9 days there. And as I started recalling little bits and pieces, realizing what was going on, and people telling me, well, you have a long history of mental illness. And now this is the where I don't really need to get into, but people fabricating just absolutely nonsense story, those are some kahunas to start doing, because all I needed was someone to say and approach my fan club and say, well, show what hospital was he entered in, or what was, diagnosis. But they treated me for bipolar schizophrenia, so they're just overdosing me on all these brain meds, anti-crazy stuff, and I'm reacting to that.
Well,
But anyway,
let
so I
alone
get out
being locked up is enough to drive someone.
Oh, it's like I said, that's story. My life's like a Seinfeld episode. It was pretty funny, but not if it's you.
Well, I'll tell you something from my past. One day, I was going to high school, and I just really didn't feel good. I got halfway through the day, got through lunch, and there was maybe 2 classes left that day. So I walked home, which was about 2 miles, and I laid on the couch and went to sleep. Well, it just so happened my dad came home from work early that day, which he never did, but he came home from work early and basically caught me at home when I should have been in school and had me what's called Baker acted. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but it's basically where you can have someone institutionalized that if you feel they are a threat to themselves or a threat to threat to others. And literally all I had done was walk home from school early and go to sleep on the couch, which, I probably should have called and, had been signed out. But I was, I had pretty good attendance in school. You can miss a certain amount of days and you're not going to be affected by it. And so, I walked home and I went to sleep. That's all I did. But, of course, I was locked up for, I believe it was either 7 to 12 days for basically a psych evaluation, and I was released at the earliest possible time because, obviously my faculties are about me and I'm not a harm to myself or others. But it's just amazing what people can do to sort of throw this system at us, which is totally unconstitutional and an anti-human and anti-constitutional system that we're just sort of stuck with. So.
Well, you need my fan club and PR team.
Yeah, really.
that I had, every inner family member supporting this long history of mental illness. And again, when I finally got my records, starting to piece together what happened, where this was my gold piece of supportive evidence of the urine drug screen was positive for benzodiazepines and methadone. Now that interacted with the narcotic pain medication I was on and the anti-inflammatory and the sleep meds that were in my system. So it was the old Heath Ledger cocktail that was given to me. They even admitted giving me Xanax, but when I had this stroke and came out of it, didn't know what was going on, they treated it as a psych item. Then it turned out that they realized that I did, so now I've got a 47-year-old guy with no history of mental illness, even though they treated me as such.
Man.
I can
well,
go through the record.
I'll tell you what, if you want to get a history of mental illness on anyone, feed them a couple Xanax for a few days, and I'll tell you what, I've personally done those things, and I'll stay very far away from them because essentially what Xanax does is it shuts off your, every person has sort of a natural propensity to not do foolish things. They're going to get ourselves hurt. So, for example, if you stand on the edge of a cliff and look down, most normal people are going to get a queasy feeling and back away from the edge of that cliff. Well, that is that part of your brain that switches on that says, don't do stupid shit. Well, when you take a drug like Xanax, what it does is it shuts off that portion of your brain, and you'll basically go and do stupid shit all night and all day, and the more and more you take it, it actually builds up in your system over time to where you'll lose days, you'll lose weeks, you'll do things you don't remember doing. And I'll tell you, if you lock someone up and force feed them Xanax, you could probably get a mental history on just about anyone. And I can tell you that from firsthand experience. Xanax is something I will never do. Now, I will take a Valium or something once in a while. It helps me sleep, as so prescribed, as legally prescribed by a doctor. But, that's if I need it. And honestly, I don't even do that anymore so much anymore now that I know the Earth isn't a spinning globe. A lot of the apprehensions and issues that I sort of have dealt with have evaporated. So, yeah.
So this was just a sample of, Mr. Engineer kicking in saying, I'll prove what happened. And so they're giving me Ativan, Zyprexa, Geodone, Restoril. So what I did was I went back and I got all the manufacturer recommendations for how these things are introduced to a new patient. And I was taking midstream, late stream dosages, not someone that was just the initial occurrence. So not only these 2, 3 times, 4 times in some instances, the recommended initial dosage. So they're loading me up on all this crap. I'm not taking any pain meds that I was on low level oxycodone, but nonetheless it was worked into my system. So now they start pumping me full of this crap. And I just start getting mad.
Yeah.
So then I got out of the hospital, figured out what was going on. They kept pushing this, you're crazy, you've got a long history. And then I knew what was going on because I found out that my family had talked to them. And immediately my wife called the Pentwater police chief and said I was suicidal. Yeah. So he came out there and said, are you suicidal? And I looked at him and said, what do I have to live for? So that bought me 72 hours, got handcuffed in the back seat and got hauled up to, this place was up in Ludington. So that bought me 72 hours while they did an evaluation. And I thought, you know what? While I'm here, I'm going to tell them what happened a year ago. Or not a year ago, that happened again, but... So I told him exactly what happened. That bought me another, I think, 8 days.
Yeah.
So again, after I tell them the story about being drugged and everything else, they thought I was totally crazy until they started finding out that what I was saying was true. Well, now in 2 weeks, this is Thanksgiving weekend, another weekend, and while I was in the hospital this time, that the people came up and cleared out my house because of the foreclosure issue. So once I got out of this nonsense, went back home, walked in, I'm expecting to find the dogs, 3 dogs, and all the possessions, and the place is empty.
Oh, my goodness.
So I freak out because by law I had to keep taking their medication and report to a psychologist and report what I was doing because I was considered a threat to the public and myself. Yeah. And again, this is all by people telling the authorities that this guy's crazy and he needs to be taken out. So I'm swinging at air trying to defend the truth, and this is it's just absolutely...
Well, that's why our country was sort of designed with due process. It's so that it was to avoid things like the witch hunts, where people could just say, oh, well, go get that person because they're a witch, and then they would go and burn them at the stake because they weighed more than a duck or whatever, right? And so, but no, we've literally come to that point, and it's been this way. Crafty people that want to get you can do so just by making a couple of phone calls to the right people and just saying certain combination of words. Now, that's the case medically and psychologically, and it has been for a while. However, now with the Patriot Act, the same thing applies to anything that could be considered a domestic terrorist, which could be as simple as growing your own vegetables and drinking raw milk. So let's not get it twisted.
Right. So then when all these stories are flying around, this idiot down at Hackley Behavioral Health, who I just called him Quack from the get-go because he kind of looked like a Bernie Sanders with the must hair and everything else, and I just looked at him, what he was suggesting. I go, you're a quack. And so then he diagnoses me with herpes simplex encephalitis. Now, again, I had a blinding headache, and felt like my right eye was the size of a softball.
Now, encephalitis, now I remember that from living in Florida. There was the West Nile virus scare.
Well, this is a brain fart, basically, that my brain blew up. And herpes simplex encephalitis. I had to look it up because they said, well, we think you might have this, but we have to do additional testing, and it's not conclusive. I didn't have insurance. Well, there's a whole other issue with whether or not I had medical insurance because I had just started up with this new job. And there's a whole other issue going on where they wouldn't let me call my employer down in Chicago because they thought I was crazy and making that up. So I ended up losing job
really?
because,
Are you serious?
It's like I said, I'm throwing out little pieces of the puzzle and not doing it in chronological order. But
I understand, but that's just crazy. Oh my God.
And the gist of it was that the nonsense and BS just got escalated, but that's what was that's what got took as the truth. And so, you want to get someone excited about being surrounded in planet stupid of people living lies, that when it started affecting me to this level where I had a job, a career, and someone I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, and 3 dogs, I was on the top of the world. And enter your flat Earth, round Earth paradigm here, and it just got turned upside down. And when I went to file a police report, I ended up going back to Chicago because I hooked up with a friend who I used to work with. And so again, from a higher level of observation, that I thought this was the bigger meaning in things, because this is a person that I really, really enjoyed the company with when I was working, but I was married at the time, and it approached dangerous territory. Well, now she was going through a divorce. I was going through my nonsense, but I didn't want to get her involved because I had an idiot ex-Chicago cop. I'll stop playing with the union president. Just the fact that he's a Chicago cop, and with a dirty kill on his record, which is a whole nother story, but got taken out. So I'm back in Chicago. I'd filed a police report and expecting that to go along, because I am giving you chunks of this story which break away from the chronological order, but it's when I came back from this and found out that absolutely nothing was going on from the police investigation. Now, granted, my fan club admitted to giving me Xanax. They admitted that I was in hysterics, passed out for 5 days, had no idea what was going on, and all this bizarre behavior that they're not embellishing. They're saying this is how crazy the guy is. It's like, well, if your wife's a ER nurse, why didn't they take me to the hospital if all this character was out of norm for me? That's the first question, is why isn't anyone asking that question?
Yeah.
Why didn't they take, if I'm acting that bizarre and crazy, why didn't they take me to the hospital? Kind of get the idea of they knew exactly what was going on. So, where was I on this? So I got back from where was I? Chicago after summer. Now we're almost a year later. That's when I went back, found out that nothing was going on, and my wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, called the police chief and said that I was suicidal. So that's why it was concurrent. It was concurrent Thanksgivings that there's just massive drama going on.
It's always the holidays, always.
Yeah. But again, I kind of have unique holidays, but not that drama is a competition sport, but it certainly could be, and I'm not saying that I might win a small award for something, but I know many other people have things that are just extraordinarily worse. And again, I'm not making this a competition of stories, but so I'm swinging at air for a year and eventually lose everything in the house, and then run out of, I went for a couple of years trying to get myself out of debt, and that's when I started working all these part-time jobs. And I needed back surgery when I started that job in Chicago. And so that was kind of unraveling by itself because they found out about my medical background, which I had lied about. Basically, lying is not telling someone the entire story. So we had projects that dealt with CTL, and we had a meeting with CTL as one of my first projects. And guy walks in the room that I had worked with for 13 years, and Adrian looks at me and goes, "I know you." So he sat down next to me, and we kind of yacked about what was going on, but the meeting started, and we're on opposite sides of the fence.
Oh, wow.
And I just defended, yeah. I mean, here's the guy that I love the guy. He's just super guy, but I was hired to talk about this bridge deck that was falling apart, and he was coming from the other side saying, "Well, it's falling apart, but it's fine." I said, "It's not fine." So the meeting ended, and the city got what they wanted, who I represented. And again, truth won. I was just the guy, the mouthpiece. The condition spoke for itself. And after the meeting, Adrian said, "So, how's it going? What have you been up to?" And told him. So again, that was the environment I got back in. But slowly the company found out that they had all this medical issues, and then I was on pain meds at the time. So then there was an issue of going out to the job site on the narcotic pain medication. There was a driving issue, which is a whole other story. But so anyway, there were things falling apart, but were easily reconcilable. But then this personal stuff came in and just wiped that out.
Right. And so, what do you think ultimately led them to finding that personal stuff? Would you reckon that would be your ex-wife, or do you know?
What personal
in
stuff?
terms of the company, the company in Chicago that you had started back up with, and they were basically pulling up this medical history.
What happened was my then manager at this new place called up people at CTL and said, "Well, we've got this engineer on board who's going to go to the meeting," and they said my name. They said, "Oh, Brian, how's he doing? Because we haven't seen him since his back surgery." So the Bill came down the hallway and said, "So, what's this about back surgery?" So then I had to, this is one of those, you get caught in a lie and pathetic.
Okay. Yeah,
so I had to explain to him what was going on. So, no, it wasn't undermining. But what was undermining was because I was trying to drive on the narcotic pain medication, was that there was enough in my DMV that said this guy can't drive under any circumstances with opiates. And so I had hired a lawyer to try and resurrect a driver's license. Meanwhile, I've got a wife that I found out later that's calling up my lawyers saying that I'm going around drinking and driving. Now, there's a whole nother layer to it that I hired a friend of her family who is a police partner with her father who ended up being a lawyer. Now, I hired Jim Flood to represent me to show all the drama that I was in life and how I had family that was going after me and would do anything in the world to prevent me from being back in the Chicago area. So, again, I got taken out by all the people that I had either hired or considered family to help support me get through this little speed bump with this new job.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's a shame. And, sometimes things, even the worst stuff that happens to us, I believe that it all sort of happens for a reason. And maybe...
I don't need to go Moses on people, but this is what led me to how can so many things happen without a bigger purpose. And so I backed into Scripture and everything else. And I think that was, I know it was someone saying, "Hey, wake up." I gave you a chance a few years ago. You didn't really listen to me the first time, so my boss kind of said, "Look, I'll give you another chance, and I will keep trying to get you to pay attention, and I'll make it even more dramatic the next time." So after this little round two of wake up and understand what the realities are, I kind of, again, backed into what the higher purpose is in life and what reality is all about at that level. and certainly made more sense. And I'm glad everything happened like it did. But oh my gosh, I should have listened to the memos that came out in 2000.
Well, and
but
that's why I think the whole, our whole society is geared towards, keep you busy, keep you working, keep you on your toes,
right.
make sure that you got that money coming in, make sure
God is gold, oil, and drugs.
Make sure you put your money in the bank so that the interest can go right back to the very beast that is enslaving us, and it's that's why they keep us busy. And it's almost as if you have to have some sort of, or at least in a lot of cases, you have to have some sort of life-altering experience, or in many cases, it's almost as if you have to have nothing to lose in order to really, go down this rabbit hole and come out the other end a vocal flat earther. And so, anyway.
Yeah, and maybe we can end this segment because I'm ready to plow right into the clip stuff. But the bottom line is, trying to wrap all this up, was back in 2007, my Planet Stupid was at its pinnacle, and since 2007, this was Planet Stupid, which I worked on and lived on for a long time. And that's gone. I don't live here anymore. Right. And the person this is the type of person that comes up with a globe Earth. This is the guy you don't want to trust. This is the guy that says, hey, everybody, what you see isn't true. And, oh, God, it's just, anyway. So, yeah, I could go through the correspondence of trying to defend your life, and all for vain, because by whatever means and powers, not meant to be, not for me to solve. That was left for others. So maybe if we want to wrap it up, because I'm ready to jump feet first into going into the eclipse stuff.
Yeah, we can wrap it up there, and on the next session we'll do eclipse, because it's at 2.5 hours, so this will tie up my computer for a good 6 hours. And that's just rendering it to a position where I can put it into Vegas Pro. So once we've got everything, and I think we can probably do, one more session. If it turns into 2 more, that's fine. But then, like I said, that'll be plenty of material for me to sift through, and it'll take me a while to get it, in a presentable sort of order. But I think what we'll do is, I'll try to come up with some, especially in terms of the eclipse data, come up with some graphics and such, as we go through it and I understand it better, that'll help to illustrate the points and the data, and just sort of show it in both models and that sort of thing, and come out with a very, ultimately polished presentation that's going to be obviously lengthy, but it'll be a distilled version of what we've sort of discussed over the last 5 sessions now. But yeah.
Oh, I don't know if it's that
so.
many. 3? I thought it was 3.
Whatever, 4, 3, 4, whatever.
Yeah,
but, well, this one might be the 4th, but anyways, it doesn't matter. But yeah, we could do 1 more, 2 more, and hopefully I'll be able to. Because I've never done anything sort of this magnitude with this much material, and I'm sure I'll do fine, because normally I'm having to piece together little bits of stuff and figuring how to fill the time. This is going to be sort of the opposite of having a huge body of material to work with, and get the best parts and really present it in such a fashion to where it's as linear as possible and makes the most sense and that sort of thing. So, anyways. You can hear I need my breathe easy.
Yeah. Well, could you do a best of and then just a raw, just kind of lay it out there so you don't have to do much? Because all I'd probably do from my standpoint is you use whatever graphics. I won't have any problem with graphics, and there might be a few sentences that I'd say, just let the quiet gloss over it. Just take out the verbiage and let it go. Because, again, I'm trying to, while we're talking, is to bounce around the screen to keep a somewhat active screen going on so it's not just straight narrative.
Yeah, no, that'll make it.
Under the supposition that everything can be laid out in its raw state.
No, that'll make it much easier in a lot of areas where I could just let it roll with audio and visual, but there'll be some places where I'm going to have to cut out areas. There'll be other places where I'll want to...
I have to pee.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course, yeah. So that sort of thing. I mean, it does take time, but what I'll probably do is when I've got something, close to, let's see, we did day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, which was yesterday. So
we
this is
are on
day,
day
no,
4?
this is day
Wow.
5. So, and yep, and then
Really?
if we do one more, it'll be day 6. And if we're averaging 2 or 3 hours per session, which I think we are, and maybe the day 1, I think day 1 we might have ended up scrapping, so maybe I'm up by 1. But anyways, there might be 1 or 2 little golden nuggets out of there. So I'm going to go through all of it, and we're not even done recording. So
that's
we'll,
right.
again, I guess what I'm saying is it's going to take some time either way. But what I'd like to do is once we've got everything recorded, and once I've spent the time to at least sort of get it cut down into somewhat presentable, what I'll do is like host a meeting with you, and we'll just go through a screen share and just watch through it, and anything that you want to change, I can just change on the fly, as opposed to going through the motions and spending the time of rendering the whole thing and then going back and making changes. It's just sort of a shortcut that'll save time, and it'll allow you to have a little bit more creative or creative input into the finished product.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Is there any way I can help you with anything?
No. Right now everything's good. I'm gonna what I'll do is I'll stop the video recording now, since I think we've pretty much covered everything videoly. And when we end this call, it'll end the audio recording. But let me stop video. Make sure this saves.